Hello, everyone, and welcome on into the Betting Pros College Football Look Ahead Show for Week 7. We're already halfway through the college football season here, and I'm Tom Viola, and as always, I'm joined by none other than the God of Thunder himself, Thor Nystrom, because we are going to be taking a look at his look-ahead lines and where he is thinking for some of the biggest games on this week's college football slate. Thor, I want to extend my condolences as the show begins here. We were all pulling for Kansas there at the end. They kept it close, ended up with the push against the spread, but that's little condolence for what happened this week against TCU.
Yeah, it's October 9th, and this is the first show that we've done together where either Kansas or Syracuse has a loss. So, I mean, that's a huge win, I suppose, and it was a valiant effort for Kansas. So I definitely can't be disappointed at all. And it's good to be with you, Thomas.
That Bean kid, I'll tell you, he looked good. I credit Kansas for not turtling when they went to their backup quarterback. They stayed aggressive, and he made a lot of the plays he needed to.
It's a great point. That kid can play, and we'll get to this when we talk about Kansas, Oklahoma, but you can't downgrade Kansas a lot if their starting quarterback is out, because Jason Bean is a player. That kid can absolutely play.
Well, let's get right in with that game because Kansas is taking on Oklahoma this week. They are 7-point dogs in Oklahoma. And I mean, Oklahoma got absolutely bushwhacked by Texas this week. Can Kansas do it?
Well, yeah. I mean, yes, they're a live dog. Absolutely. The enormous part of this handicap has to do with the quarterback statuses on both sides. Obviously, is Dylan Gabriel going to play on the Oklahoma side? Is Jalen Daniels going to play on the Kansas side? With Gabriel, there's been the thing about Oklahoma used to have the 2-week mandatory sit out for the concussions if it was a confirmed concussion diagnosis. I actually don't know under the Venables regime if that's still in place. If it is, I didn't stay in a Holiday Inn Express last night, but I'm pretty sure that Gabriel has a confirmed concussion diagnosis. So you would think that would mean that he would have to sit out. But again, I'm not sure if that protocol is still in place under Venables. So stay tuned on that one. And then with Daniels, he suffered the injury in their last game when against TCU when he was scrambling around at the right around the sideline, and he takes a sack and his right shoulder was driven into the ground, which typically is a pretty ominous injury. Jason Bean, like I was just mentioning, came in and played absolutely awesome, was dropping dimes everywhere. And that was a kid who started earlier in his career at North Texas and was also a track star as a prep in Texas. Not only does he have a good arm, he is also an awesome athlete. Like I was sort of teasing earlier when we did the intros, I don't think you downgrade Kansas a whole heck of a lot if Daniels is out. If Gabriel is out, like as we've seen, you downgrade Oklahoma quite a bit. Like you downgrade Oklahoma a touchdown or more if Gabriel's out. If Daniels is out, maybe a point on the Kansas side. So you have to watch that very closely. Just in a vacuum, my line on that game is Oklahoma minus 6.4. Live right now, it's Oklahoma minus 7. So I'm pretty close to the Vegas line, just showing the smallest amount of value on Kansas. But again, you got to watch that very closely. Another thing I'll say is Oklahoma. I had mentioned this last week in some of the episodes that we did. They have perilous depth issues at linebacker right now. They are down to 4 active healthy scholarship linebackers. That's another thing you have to watch very closely, regardless of what Kansas's quarterback situation, whether it's going to be Bean or Daniels. Kansas does all the motion stuff, gets people out, moving around motion, and then moves the quarterbacks out, on the bootlegs and stuff like that. They put the opposing linebackers into conflict on every single play. And Venables, going back to his Clemson days, asked so much of his linebackers the responsibility, because he does all these replacer concepts where in terms of the blitzing and the coverage where he'll blitz and then he has ask a different defender to replace that person in the alignment. which again, it asks a lot of the linebackers because you have to, do different things. You have to put on different hats. Not only are you a linebacker on a different play, you might ask to be an edge rusher. You might ask to be, have safety responsibility.
Yeah, there's a lot of different roles that have to go on here for these linebackers, and they haven't shown so far that they've been able to handle it. How much longer do you think Venables really has, especially if Kansas pulls it off and manages to win this game, especially with Jason Bean at quarterback? That's 0-4 in conference play for Oklahoma. I can't imagine Venables is going to be the most popular guy in town much longer.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's going to make it at least through the end of next year. I mean, just because he's new, you're going to give him a little bit of leash, but this is not a good start for Brent Venables, and like when Lincoln left and you hired Venables, there's all the Oklahoma fans being like, oh, who cares that Lincoln left? We upgraded a coach, and those folks are very quiet right now. This has been an absolutely horrible start for Venables. I would argue right now that Oklahoma might be the second worst team in the Big 12. And they are moving in on being the worst team in the Big 12. I think the worst team in the Big 12 right now is West Virginia, and it is becoming arguable. But between them and West Virginia, without Dylan Gabriel, Oklahoma probably is the worst team in the Big 12. The status of Dylan Gabriel is absolutely crucial for this game. If Dylan Gabriel doesn't play, Kansas is going to beat Oklahoma. I'm just telling you right now. So you need to watch that status very, very closely. Getting the 7 points, I mean, again, watch it closely. You might just want to take it. If you can see that out there in the marketplace, because Kansas is live, even playing Gabriel. But if Gabriel's out, it's a gift getting 7 points with Kansas.
Yeah, I'm tempted to take that line now and then hope, because would you say that this line with Gabriel playing should be around 7?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so then
it's a fair line. Yeah. Yep.
So then for me right now, I'm looking to take Kansas and get some action on this game early. And then, I mean, you don't want to hope that someone's injured, obviously. And these are college kids. We want them to be okay. But if you're going to take the Kansas, this is probably the best time that you're going to want to do it. But how about Penn State versus Michigan? It's going to be a classic Big Ten battle here. I personally think Penn State's a little bit overrated. I don't trust this team ever, and that's probably jading my bias a little bit here. But Michigan is getting just 7 points in this game in the Big House. That line feels wrong to me.
Yeah, I mean, it feels a little bit short to me too. It was funny. I was watching the Viking game earlier with the Michigan alum, and he had asked me what I thought that spread would be, and I was higher when I guessed it than it turned out to be. So I'm definitely with you on that. Michigan has impressed me quite a bit this year, and Penn State, they've just been. It's just been kind of meh. I mean, like the last, and they are coming off of a bye. So maybe, there's an idea that they're going to come in rested or whatever. But like the last time that we saw them, they were beating Northwestern by 10 points at home, sort of a thing. The offense isn't terribly explosive. They can't take the top off of the defense. The rushing attack has gotten marginally better. The running back room has gotten marginally better. The offensive line has gotten marginally better, but it does neither of them scare you, because where they were coming from was all really, really bad. It's just not a team that terrifies me. And Michigan is still a playoff contender. So yeah, I mean, for me that play would be Michigan or nothing.
Who do you trust over Michigan or Ohio State? I mean, I know it's the classic rivalry there, but is Michigan really at that same level?
Michigan's not at Ohio State's level. For if it was that game on a neutral, for me, it would depend on what the line is, but it's not to the degree where I would disqualify Michigan. Mm-hmm. They're still both at the near levels where they were at recently. And obviously we saw how would I put it? Michigan still has the puncher's chance. And last time Hassan Haskins knocked out Ohio State. So it's still that sort of situation where you absolutely wouldn't discount Michigan and Michigan could absolutely still win.
How about Auburn versus Ole Miss here? Should be an interesting game because Ole Miss is at least the 9th ranked team in the nation right now. maybe interesting is not quite the word because Auburn's disappointed this year, but should Ole Miss be a 16-point favorite in this SEC showdown?
Yeah, I think that's fair. My line on it is Ole Miss minus 15. And it being up to 6, I think that's a fair tax because of the Brian Harsin thing. Every single week I'm waiting for Auburn to quit on him and for Auburn then to fire Brian Harsin. And we'll see when that ends up happening. But I do think it's fair. And Mississippi, they've looked pretty good. Last week they, early on Vanderbilt was playing with them, but then Ole Miss turned it on at the end, and then Lane Kiffin, the very humorous thing at the end of that game of very clearly, overtly going for the cover, and then getting it. I think I would lean towards Ole Miss in that game, and I definitely would not be backing Auburn anytime soon.
Now, how about let's talk about them. We already talked about Oklahoma, but Texas now takes on Iowa State here as 14-point favorites. Thor, the question that we all want to know is Texas back?
Texas is getting closer and closer to being back for sure. But like last week, I think in the court of public opinion, they're probably going to be inflated a bit because of last week's result. Oklahoma obviously is way down, and circumstantially, they caught Oklahoma in an all-time spot last week without Gabriel, with where the linebacker spot is and some of the different positions, like I was mentioning before. But and Texas had gotten back Quinn Ewers, and they were back at full strength. But this Texas team is really good. It's the best incarnation of Texas that we've seen for the past few years. This Texas team is good. Is it back to to the degree that it's a playoff contender? I'm not sure about that, but they are pretty good. Quinn Ewers is for real, and Bijan Robinson's the best running back in America. So, like, you do have that stuff, and they can play defense as well. Like, we saw that against Alabama. I'm not going to say we saw that against Oklahoma, because I don't think that Oklahoma offense run by Davis Bevel and whatnot, I don't think they could have scored on UL Monroe, but they're back to a reasonable degree. Iowa State, they're going to require Texas to play a different kind of a game. Iowa State, they drag every team out in the deep waters. They don't want to play a football game. They want to do a rock fight. Every different team that they play, it's a rock fight. Iowa plays rock fights with everybody. So, but Kansas State was a rock fight. Every single team. So they're not going to do a shootout with Texas. If Texas thinks they're going to do a shootout with Iowa State, they're going to be sadly mistaken. This is going to be a low scoring kind of a game, a methodical game. I would be looking more at the under, I think, than the side of this one. And I think probably Iowa State is more of a live dog than this line is going to be indicating. My numbers are more bullish on Texas than I would be personally, just because I respect Iowa State more of what I think the game script and the game flow of this game could be. I think Iowa State has a shot to ambush Texas in this game, particularly for Texas coming off of that exhilarating win over Oklahoma and a week of Texas is back, people pumping their tires off of just annihilating Oklahoma.
Yeah, you're going to start feeling that hype now, and that's when you can really catch a team. And Iowa State, like, they've done it before. They've gone into people's houses and been a cyclone before and taken out some of these teams. I think this could be another spot. What do you think?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, this is the classic Texas letdown spot. Yeah. It's the classic Iowa State ambush spot, just sort of the confluence of both lining up. I think I would be looking to maybe nibble on the Iowa State, both the spread and maybe even the money line. I mean, I feel like people are going to be betting on Texas all week, so I don't even think you need to bet on Iowa State early. The line's Texas minus 14, but I feel like this thing's probably going to toggle up over that. So for me, I'm going to be waiting until it gets to 14.5 before I look to fire the bullet. But that's what I'm going to be looking for in that one.
Now let's talk about some really big games this week. And It doesn't get bigger than this one. 18 versus 15. You know what I'm talking about here. We got Syracuse and NC State going at it in the Loud House, the JMA Wireless Dome, as it has always been known. Where are you going in this one? Because right now, Syracuse favored by 4.5 over NC State. I was not expecting this. I feel like there's a lot being considered with the fact that Syracuse had that incredible win over Wagner, which isn't something you often say about an opponent of that caliber. But anytime that you get the other team to say, hey, can we shorten the quarters to 10 minutes for the second half? You're doing something right. But NC State, even coming off that loss to Clemson and then that game against Florida State that didn't quite go how they wanted it to, they're still a good team.
Yeah, I feel like people are going to look at this and, like when they're looking down the betting card and they're going to see Syracuse favored by, 4 or whatever against NC State, an NC State team that's coming off of Syracuse favored by 4.5, an NC State team, a 5-1 NC State team coming off of a 2-point win over Florida State. And they're going to be scratching their heads like Syracuse is favored by 4.5 over NC State. The context that people need to keep in mind, not necessarily the Syracuse win over Wagner, but but maybe a little bit. But it's more the Devin Leary injury for NC State. And in addition to that, NC State's wide receiver 2, Carter, he got injured in the game against Florida State, and NC State's running back got injured in that game. So NC State is dealing with several injuries right now. We're recording this on Sunday night. We'll have to see NC State's injury report in the coming days to see who's in, who's out. But that's a team that's dealing with a rash of injuries right now. We'll have to see on Saturday, like what team they end up trotting out. But that could be a seriously undermanned team heading into Syracuse. Syracuse is coming off of a bye. They're and the Wagner game. So basically 2 buys. So they are fresh as a daisy going up against a team that is badly beat up and seriously decimated. So you're looking at what was that book, Tale of Two Cities sort of a thing. Syracuse is in a very, very advantageous situation to remain undefeated, which explains everything you need to know about that line. If both of these teams were at full strength, on a neutral field, this line might be totally flipped, but that is not what this scenario is. It's Syracuse at home in the situation that we discussed, and the line is what it is.
Well, Thor, I'm excited. I'm scared. I'm probably not going to bet this game because I've already got too much riding on it from an emotional standpoint, but oh man, this would be a sweet one to see. Now, I hate to bring it back up here, but we got to talk about TCU because they're going to be in an interesting one against Oklahoma State here. They're laying 3.5 at home, but Oklahoma State has been good so far this season. Where are you going in this one? Are you riding with the Horned Frogs, or are you thinking that Oklahoma State's going to get them in this spot after that big game that they just had?
Yeah, you wonder in this one is TCU, like, when is TCU gonna have a letdown spot, right? Like TCU just the bar keeps raising for them. It was a team over the summer that I was harping on over and over again that I was extremely high on, and they keep even going over my bar. But again, like, is there a letdown spot coming for them? Like last week, they go into Lawrence. They on College game day, they beat an undefeated team on the road. Now they're coming back home, but like, a lot of times you'd be like, is this going to be a letdown spot after you just win in that electric atmosphere? But like, they haven't had a letdown spot. Yeah, they've had other big wins, this year and haven't had it yet. And then meanwhile, for Oklahoma State, I mean, they've also been a team that has had several big wins this year, and they've just kept the momentum going. So it's another one of these two teams that have just kept building and building and building. Oklahoma State for me is sort of the opposite. TCU is a team that I've been higher on than the market throughout. Oklahoma State, I've been wrong about the entire time. So I'm pumping my own tires about my TCU take. I got to go the opposite. I've been wrong about Oklahoma State. Like I thought Oklahoma State was not going to be. I thought they were going to be weighed down this year because they had lost so many guys on defense. And I didn't trust Spencer Petras. So last year they were, totally led by the foot of their dominant defense, and they had lost Malcolm Rodriguez and all these different guys on their defense. And I didn't think that Spencer Petras could do it. And Spencer Petras has gotten way better. I'm shocked when I watch Spencer Petras this year. He has actually become like a solid singular quarterback. And this year they don't have like Jalen Warren, for instance, on offense, like to give all the usage to. And Spencer Sanders is doing it. He hadn't even had like Bray, like the receiver, been injured and stuff like that. And Sanders is still doing it. And the defense been a little bit better than I thought it was going to be. And that's a credit to the coaching staff as well. This one is tough for me because my line is pretty close. I actually give the slight line value to Oklahoma State, at least where the line is right now. My line on this game is TCU minus 1.9. It's a game that I'm going to be digging into this week, and try to gauge sort of where both teams' heads are at. But a very interesting game on Saturday afternoon in the Big 12.
Now, a game that I want to talk about next, it's not two ranked teams, but it's certainly two brand names here in Florida versus LSU. Florida, they're not doing too badly here. They lost to Kentucky and Eastern Washington, not Eastern Washington. I'm looking at the wrong game here. They lost to Kentucky and Tennessee. They beat Eastern Washington, and they're coming off the win against Mizzou this week here. And going up against LSU in this one, a couple of years ago, you'd be talking about a potential 1-2 matchup right here in this game. They're laying 2.5 points against the Tigers in this spot. And is Florida still good despite the fact that they're obviously not ranked at this point? They've had those 2 top 25 losses. They did beat Utah in the first week. What's your opinion on this Gators team?
I'm fading Florida. This is one where I'm sitting dead red on LSU. I think the line is, well, I'll just put it this way. My numbers favor LSU, and I think in the marketplace, LSU might be favored right now had last week, had the result not been what it was with LSU. They ended up getting smoked last week, and it is what it is. Tennessee spanked them at home. LSU lost 40-13, but I still think that LSU is a solid team, and Florida's result wasn't much more impressive. They barely got by Missouri at home. I don't like that Florida team. I don't. Most people watch Anthony Richardson in that opener put on the Superman cape against Utah. He's reverted back to what he was previously for the ever since then, basically, of just being the super duper inconsistent player that has placement issues, decision-making issues, pocket awareness issues, the whole gamut. He certainly, still has the ceiling and everything like that. He certainly flashes, but you still have the vacillation with him. I just don't trust that team. I don't. And with LSU, I trust them marginally more. I guess is the way that I would say that I like them a bit more, and I think that they match up better in this game. And so I'm going to take LSU in that one, even though that they're on the road.
Speaking of another team that might be a tad overrated, I'm just surprised. James Madison is their first season at this level, and they're already ranked 25th in the nation. That seems just a tad insane to me. They're going up against Georgia Southern as 10.5-point road favorites here. Do you think this line is what it should be, or are people just buying into the hype of this team that is, it's a great story, but are they actually good enough to be a top 25 team?
That line's inflated. My line on that game is James Madison minus 7.2. Georgia Southern's legit, which is crazy for me to say in the first year of Clay Helton there taking over that triple option roster, but they can actually play. And speaking to that for a second, Georgia Southern is throwing the ball even more than Mississippi State is, which is just bizarre, and they're doing it just as well. But that's a story for another time. James Madison is good. They're really good. They played awesome, and they've played way better than I thought they would. But again, like I think the market now is taking it a bit too far. And I think, for the sports books, at a certain point, you have to start charging the tax on them, because the sports books are starting to get nicked on James Madison. So you have to start incentivizing people to bet on the other side, because you've lost money in some of the recent weeks on the James Madison thing, because they're covering every week. So again, you have to push people to the other side. I mean, this happens when you have a team that's covering every single week. But I think that's what explains the discrepancy here. But objectively, you're getting about 3 points of line value if you want to bet on Georgia Southern. For me, that would be the side I'd be on.
Okay. I feel like you're completely spot on there with the fact that when you have a team covering by this much, the books are going to go, okay, we need to reevaluate a little bit and start shading this a little bit the other way, because like you said, they want to get money on the other side here. Now, this next game up, we've got Clemson at 4 now in the rankings, going up against Florida State, who of course has fallen out after that loss to NC State here. This number right now is going to be 4 points in favor of the Tigers. Florida State, can they do it?
Probably not. My line on this game is Clemson -6, but at least you give Florida State the puncher's chance. We'll have to see on Brian Brisse's status. Clemson stud defensive lineman. He missed another game this past Saturday. He missed the Boston College game. He's now missed 2 straight games with his non-football medical issue. He's a big deal for them. Clemson has had the upfront injuries. I think Xavier Thomas came back for Clemson on Saturday, but Clemson has had these shuttlings in their front seven. They've had all these different injuries, but that's something to keep an eye on. Brian Brise is he might be the best defensive tackle in America, but if not, he's one of the 3 or 4 best. So his injury status is certainly something to keep an eye on, especially against this Florida State team that runs the ball so well. Mike Norvell, going back several, going back to his Memphis days, teams are one of the best rushing coaches in the nation. But speaking to that, the running back for them, Ward, got injured in the last game. So that's another status thing that you're going to have to keep an eye on in this one. But I think I would lean Clemson in this one. Florida State did not look very good in their last one against NC State. And then we talked about NC State before. NC State had suffered all of those injuries in that game. And that's an NC State team that looked terrible the week before against Clemson. They had lost by 10 in that game, but NC State had scored the garbage touchdown at the very end. So really it's more like a 17-point loss. And you're like, well, it was to Clemson, but I can bake in the context that Clemson was basically playing with their second string defense in that game, because Clemson had ruled out all of these defenders. Like you can go back and look at who they played in that game. They had ruled out all of these different starters in that game. So NC State was basically playing against a lot of these second stringers or whatever. Not an impressive performance by NC State. And then Florida State then loses to NC State when NC State was had lost Leary, then the running back, and then the wide receiver too, and was down some of these other guys, whatever. I think Clemson, especially if now they're way healthier than they were back then. And now Florida State might be without their running back. I like Clemson in that one.
Now, Kentucky, we've already talked about a couple of them. It's the basketball blue bloods playing football and playing it well right now. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about how, look at all these teams: Duke, UCLA, Kentucky, 4-0, Syracuse, obviously, but no one was giving them any credit. But I'm not bitter or anything about that. Now, all of a sudden, Kentucky, 2 straight losses here to Ole Miss and the Gamecocks. They go to play Mississippi State now in a battle of 22 versus 16. Should Kentucky still even be ranked at 22nd after 2 straight losses like this? And should they be getting 6 points, or should they be getting more at home against Mississippi State in this spot?
Well, it's all of those questions are dependent on is Will Levis healthy or not, right? Like, because if Will Levis plays against South Carolina, they beat South Carolina, and then those are all mute. And then if he plays against Mississippi State, it's a different story. And his status, it's like all that stuff is dependent on that, right? Like if he plays in this game, like I'm taking the 6 points, but if he doesn't play, I'm laying for sure with Mississippi State. Like Mississippi State is going to beat the heck out of Kentucky if it's who that kid Sharon or whoever that Kentucky was playing. Will Levis, the difference between Will Levis and the backup of Kentucky, it's legitimately worth double-digit points. The backup of Kentucky stinks. And they were, I mean, like Chris Rodriguez, he was doing his best out there. Like he ran against South Carolina, ran for like 120 yards or 125 yards. He was still grinding it out, but there was absolutely no threat of the pass. And South Carolina, a team that has terrible trench play on both sides of the ball, they still controlled that game like the entire way on the road. And Mississippi State is a far superior team to South Carolina. So, I mean, again, this game is highly dependent on Will Levis's status. That's the thing that people need to monitor. If you think that Will Levis is not going to play in this game, you need to bet on Mississippi. You need to lay the points and take the value before that's announced. But if you think that Levis is going to play, absolutely take the points. Well, there's still value because when the news comes out about that, there's going to be line movement. So if you get information beforehand, take the value.
Now, Thor, you know what my favorite bet of the week is?
What's that?
USC versus Utah. Should Utah win this game, I will bet you any amount of money that we will hear the pundits on TV going, oh, number 20 Utah upsets number 7 USC. What a game, blah, blah, blah. They're going to call it a big upset, but it's not because Utah is laying 4 points against the Trojans here. And yeah, the Trojans, they are 7th in the nation right now, but you look at their schedule, Rice, Stanford, Fresno State, barely squeaked by Oregon State. Then you had the big win over Arizona State. And then, of course, they go out, they beat Washington State last week, yesterday, 30-14. But now they go to play the Utes, and the Utes are laying 4 in this one as the 20th ranked team in the nation. I guarantee you if they win this game, they're going to be calling it an upset when it is not. But do you think that the Utes can pull this one out? Is this line where it should be?
I mean, they certainly can. They're a team that profiles decently well against USC. The way that Whittingham has always constituted his defense, it was a direct response to spread offenses. And obviously that's what Lincoln runs. Does that mean that they're going to beat them? Not necessarily. But and then also on offense, they run the physical downhill running game, and we'll see how USC's new look defense, how it deals with that. I would have been concerned if Tavion Thomas, the Utah running the big physical downhill running back of Utah, if he wasn't playing in this game. But even though he was questionable, and even up to kickoff, there was these questions when they were playing UCLA on Saturday: is Tavion Thomas going to play? Which I didn't even know that he was questionable before that game, but then he ended up playing. So I guess that he's fine. So he is going to pose a problem for USC defense. Utah is going to ride him there. So I mean, does Utah have absolutely? They got a shot. There's the UFC saying of styles make fights. This is a fascinating stylistic fight. You have the burly brawler type in Utah against your more stylish kind of fighter in USC. This is, for me, this is a handicap I'm going to get into all week because I don't think this is one you got to bet early in the week. Right now, that there's no value on this line at all. My adjusted number on this one right now is Utah minus 4.3. Line right now in the market is Utah minus 4. It's right there. So, but yeah, it's one to dig in for the week. But yeah, I mean, either of these two teams could win, and it's again totally opposite strategies, and it's going to be one of those two opposing forces locking horns on Saturday.
Now, the last game that we want to talk about here, the biggest one of the week, well, second biggest behind Syracuse, NC State, but who's counting? Alabama against Tennessee. I haven't seen the Vols ranked 6th in a long time, my friend, but here we are in this one. And Bama did not look great last week, and they dropped all the way down to 3. They're laying 7.5 points going into Tennessee here. I mean, it's 3 versus 6, but is Tennessee really all that good? Is Tennessee living up to the hype here this season for you? Are they where they should be? They've got the wins over Ball State, Pitt, Akron, Florida, and LSU, neither of which are now ranked. I don't know. This resume isn't jumping off the page to me. Should they be 6th, or should they be getting more than 7.5 against Bama? Tennessee's good.
Tennessee's good for sure. The win against LSU in Baton Rouge by, what was it, 27? That was the one for me that was like the wake up, like the alarm bell one of like this team is legit. The game against Alabama, we talked about a couple games this week where it comes down to a player status. This is probably the biggest one.
Yeah, CJ Stroud. Yeah. Not CJ Stroud, Bryce Young. Is Bryce Young going to play? If this whole game comes down to that, if Tennessee gets Jalen Milroe, I might even favor Tennessee, like outright, right? But if they're playing Bryce Young, this line should be Alabama by double digits. And what I think that Vegas has done with this line, it's essentially split the baby, right? Like, installing Alabama as 7.5 point favorites at Tennessee, right? If Alabama comes out and says Bryce Young playing, I think you're going to see this line tick up to Alabama minus 10.5 or 11, maybe even a little bit above, real quick. But if he's ruled out, it's going to drop real quick. So I mean, like that's what I think has happened here. Is you're dropping it right in the middle until we see. Nick Saban ain't going to tell anybody. He played some games with Jimbo last week, which I loved, with just chef's kiss. He didn't say anything all week, and then game time was just absolutely fabulous. Didn't say anything. I didn't think there was any chance that Bryce Young was going to play. He has an AC joint sprain of his throwing shoulder. Quinn Ewers has an AC joint sprain of his non-throwing shoulder, and he's out for 3 weeks. So it's like there's no shot that Bryce Young going to play the next week. And then they announced Bryce Young as the starter on the PA system 30 minutes before the game. I'm getting all these text messages, and I'm like, no way. And it's crazy. And then, of course, Milroe then, actually trots out with the starters, like when, they take their first snap. Just epic trolling by Nick Saban, but we'll see in this one. We don't know. We have absolutely no idea. An AC joint sprain is not something that categorically takes you out. It's a pain threshold injury that you theoretically can play through a combination of, again, pain tolerance dash taking one of them shots. Sort of a thing. It's both your biology, and then also, if you take something that can mitigate the pain, et cetera, we'll see. He got 6 more days to see, but whether Bryce Young is playing is going to go a long way towards this handicap and also the results of the game. But right now, with where that line is, it is very clear that the sports books are splitting the baby. You need to monitor Bryce Young's status, but right now, with where that is, this is a very fair line that has been put out. Thor, that play call by Jimbo Fisher at the end of the game, the final play, was one of the worst things. They didn't even throw it to the end zone. So dumb. So you have a shot. You have a shot, man. Yeah, and they didn't take it. Yeah, you actually had a shot to win that game. You actually had a shot, and oh man, yeah. I mean, I'm not an A&M fan. I don't care. Yeah, but it would be nice. It's always nice to see Bama go down. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't care either way. But it's like just for the sport of football, you're like, man. I mean,
why aren't you trying to win, man? Like,
I
why
don't
don't
know.
you at least put the ball in the end zone, or at least give yourself the best shot of it? Like, it's just one of those where you're just like frustrated for fairness, you
Yep.
know?
It
Yeah.
was more frustrating than the Thursday night football. Russell Wilson, absolutely horrible fourth down play on the goal line there. But it is what it is, and we're on to the next week here, and that is going to do it for us, ladies and gentlemen. Those are the biggest games of the week. Thor, thank you so much for your thoughts as always. Of course, if people want to find you and what you're doing around the internet and what you're doing for college football for betting pros for the rest of the week, they can head onto your Twitter at ThorKU. You're going to be posting there all the time. One of the best accounts. Seriously, guys, give him a follow. You don't want to miss it. And of course, this Wednesday night, the podcast is going to drop with you and Scott Bogman, where you guys are detailing the weekend ahead. We got a more clear picture of the lines at this point. And of course, Saturday morning, bright and early, 7 a.m. Pacific time, 10 a.m. Eastern. You guys are breaking down the day's slate of games, making sure that everybody has exactly what they need to get through the weekend ahead. It was another great show this week with Mike Farrell, and you can look forward to another one next week on the Betting Pros YouTube page. And don't forget to follow Betting Pros at Betting Pros on Twitter. And Thor, thanks again so much for being with us here. Guys, best of luck this week, and let's cash some tickets.